Hello and welcome to week 8 in the psychology of adulthood. And my apologies for getting this out a little late, but everybody's in the discussion boards anyway. You're doing great. So I'm just going to follow up with a quick discussion here of chapters 8 and 9, talking about generativity, which is the next stage in Erikson's theory, and midlife events. It's kind of those things pairing together. I've separated them out into 2 chapters, but nonetheless talking quickly about some of the concepts related to that. So we go to our slideshow right now, and here in chapter 8, talking about generativity, we have to talk about Erikson. Now, Erikson's theory, we can see this in his entire, so you've seen this graphic before, and I've highlighted 2 areas. There's the school age, industry, and inferiority, and then there's the middle adulthood, generativity and stagnation. So there's a degree to which these 2 stages are familiar, and that has to do with the establishment of an individual in their career and what their accomplishments are going to be, and the development of expertise. So I want to take a look at the concepts of expertise, and in one case, authority, making that distinction between someone who's an expert at something, and then how does someone become an authority on that, just one level higher. And what we will see is, as we look at the different concepts of becoming an expert, that is sort of the part of generativity that's happening from young adulthood, building the pieces of your life that have to do with career and family and all those things, and then now you're getting good at it. You're getting experience and time on task and whatnot, becoming good at those things to the point that you become an individual that others are learning from, and we see that expertise. And that might manifest itself in various ways, depending on the area of generativity, which we're going to get into after I do this slide. So here we have expertise and authority. What makes us an expert? And we all become experts in many things. So I want you to be able to just kind of like generalize this to all the areas in which you will be able to express generativity. Certainly, content know-how. We know the stuff. We know the stuff on our job. We know ourselves. We know how to take care of the house. We know how to take care of our family. Just we have the skill set. Next, we have experience and time using those. And that's a very important thing. There's a time factor here. It's not just knowing it. It's also having done it for a while. And I think probably the best way to think about this is you can know something, but over time you get the experience of having done it wrong. Mistakes happen over time. Successes can happen very early, but mistakes happen over time. And so over time, I feel I've made enough mistakes being a teacher and then learned from them that I try not to make those mistakes anymore, and that's part of the effect that time has had on the developing of my personal expertise in that area. Another area, when we're doing our work, when experts are doing the work, it's fluid, has an automatic sense to it. They can do complex things very, very fluidly. Just think of an athlete being able to do complex maneuvers very quickly. Think of a surgeon being able to do stitching, really, really complex movements, doing them very simply, learning how to type, all of these things that we can become experts at, and what that behavior looks like when we're looking at an expert doing it. We might attain titles, and these are socially recognized labels of expertise. They might be licenses. They might be titles in a job. They might be degrees, college degrees, and other achievements and measures, awards, certifications, and those kinds of things that we become experts at. Now, if we take these 2 last ones, these titles, socially embedded titles that recognize expertise, and the achievements and different measures in which we do that, that's where we're going to see the manifestation of authority. As these begin to build, we start recognizing expertise within the domain or within a specific application of the domain. And that person can contribute to the growth of the domain through application, creativity, and innovation. And in a very important way, when we think about generativity, when you look at generativity as a definition, you often see the notion of passing on to the next generation. So some individuals become experts, and then a subset of those become authorities, and they attain the ability to pass on to the next generation. You know what I mean? Like, so might be the head person in the shop. Oh, if you want to know how to do this, go ask Stan, or go ask Elizabeth. How are you going to do this thing? Because she's the expert at it. She's the one who's been doing it the longest, and there you go. And that person has authority within that organization. Now, then we have, on a very grand case, we have authority. People were authorities on particular subject matters at a state, global, national way. So Dr. Shah here in Maine, who is running our CDC, is an expert. He's an authority on these things. You look at his history, I should have included, I'm just making this up right now, but I should have included some of this. Him as an authority figure, his history of dealing with plagues and illnesses on a global level is amazing. The Chronicle of Education, I believe, or it might have been even Time Magazine, did a whole story on him and his innovation here in Maine. And just, again, look it up. I probably should have put it in here as a great example of expertise and authority, and to see how lucky we are in Maine to have Dr. Shah with us. And maybe somebody knows him, and pass on this video to him. We're all very grateful for what he did. Now, how does this look inside of Erikson's theory? So I've taken the graphic, kind of shoved it off to the side here, and I'm just looking at this sort of context from young adulthood through middle adulthood into maturity, which we'll be talking about later in the class. What are the focal areas by which we become experts, sometimes an authority, and we are able to achieve a sense of generativity? And as much as we talk about work, it's not the only way. So we can do that with family. We can do that with other family, as I put it, with friends and our peer groups and organizations that we belong to, social organizations or work organizations, our entire network. We can create a sense of generativity there. Of course, work. And then separating out vocation. I like to do this because not everybody's work is their big passion. For some people, work is a means to an end. They enjoy what it is, but it's not their identifying characteristic. Maybe it's something they do on the side, or it's a hobby, or something they're hoping will turn into a profession later on, or even spiritual or nature-based or anything, whatever. It's something else besides the way in which they make money to pay their bills becomes the thing that they're really, really focused on in terms of their identity. So their generativity might not come from their work. It might come from this vocation, this sense of duty to this particular area of labor. We have creative endeavors, writing, reading, doing the garden, building a house, all of these things that we can create generativity with. And then finally, of course, spirituality. Each one of these is a dimension in which we can create generativity. Or across all of them, individuals can create this sense of generativity. And if we feel that these things are not happening, that's going to be sort of the next chapter, is when we're looking at areas of our family, friends, work, feeling like I don't have a real vocation, my creativity seems to be drying up, I feel disconnected from others and any sort of transcendent world. That individual approaching middle adulthood may enter into a process of crisis, or into what I would call the midlife event, which I'll be talking about in just a moment. So the last theory I want to talk about here before we transition into those very things is something that happens over time, in the creation of our sense of self. And our sense of self, according to the, forgot his name, Carl Rogers, that's him. Carl Rogers, famous psychologist, very famous for statements like unconditional positive regard, and as very, very influential in terms of the movement of modern day psychology, created a personality theory. Now, his personality theory is that our self, let's throw puzzle pieces in here, there's puzzle pieces all over these things, but there's different types, and he called there's a true self, who we are, there's the ideal self, who we'd like to be, and there's the public self, is the self that we project to the world. And there might be direct contradictions. Some of our true self might truly not be our public self. But more often, there's aspects of our true self that remain hidden and aspects of our self that we make out in public. And they're different. So maybe I have a collection, and I'm pretty obsessed with Peanuts memorabilia, the comic strip by Charles Schulz. It's an aspect of my personality and myself that I keep fairly private, so it's not part of my public self, it's actually part of my true self. And so all of these, the way these interact with each other, imagine those, but over time, what is happening, particularly through the end of young adulthood and into and through middle adulthood into old age, is that these entities tend to get more and more alike. And so at the beginning, we may be looking at basically an incongruent self, or something like this. The overlap is different for everybody. In Rogerian therapy, the purpose, the reason why he came up with a personality theory is to use in therapy. In therapy, the purpose of the therapy is to integrate the self. Your true self and your public self and your idea self are out of sync. The process of therapy is to bring them together. That process also happens over time, and therapy is simply a way to hasten that process when being untrue to yourself might be damaging. And so this is kind of his approach to therapy, was this notion of we start with a relatively incongruent self where these things are out of line, but then over time, and I did this from youth to aged, over time, if we track this, we would see changes that occur gradually. These are moving together. As we age, we might care less about other people's thoughts about us. Our true self is fine. Our ideal self, we start to make some accommodations for that, and we come into this state of being a congruent self. And so these aspects of our self become all one thing. So there's a tremendous amount of overlap between our true self, ideal self, and our public self. We are who we say, we walk our talk, those kind of things. We don't have as many people to please. There's functional things for this. We might not, when we're on the job, let's say, we might not be willing to share some aspects of our ideal self or our private self, because we're still trying to impress people at the workplace. I mean, there's reasons why we do this. It's, being an open book about all of these things is not necessarily a good thing in every context. But Carl Rogers felt, the more congruent we were in terms of the better we would feel. We're being true to ourselves. We're being true to what we want to become. We're making those kinds of changes to be the person that we want to be. And I think that happens through a lot of lifetime, a lot of experiences and whatnot. And I think it's a natural process as we grow older. There's not too many elderly people that I have met who are significantly incongruent. They pretty much say what they want to say. sometimes to a fault. If anybody's out there works with this population, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, for this particular chapter, before we go into the next one, we have a discussion where I want you to share what you're expert at. I want you to look at that graphic in there. Think about how we've been talking about expertise. What are you good at? Are you an authority somewhere? Are you an authority at work, or you're an authority at home? You are the person that fixes the car. And no one else is going to take, if you're going to show people how to do it because you're the one who knows how to do it. Those kind of things, those kinds of expertise. Maybe even discuss where are you at in terms of the development of your expertise while you are pursuing your degree here at KV. And then the second discussion about the integrated self. Reflecting on that, reflecting on where you are at, sharing some ideas about when am I incongruent here, when am I not, when people I know that are very congruent in themselves, maybe grandma, says what she says, and does what she does. Those could be some funny stories to share. So go ahead and share those in the discussion board. Now we move on now to chapter 9, a very short chapter. What do we do when you look at that? Remember I showed you that Erickson's theory, that little part of Erickson's theory, and all the ways in which we want to achieve generativity, and I got to generalize this across the lifespan. Whenever we have a goal and we're experiencing barriers to get that goal, we are in potentially a crisis. But I'm going to first of all kind of separate. We have midlife events and crises, and we have psychosocial events that occur across the lifespan. So the reassessing of things and where I am and what's my trajectory here in life happens throughout the lifespan. But in particular, it happens in midlife because there's an experience of physical aging, which reminds us of the clock ticking. It's the biological clock, meaning if I have always had the plans to achieve and be generative in particular areas, I have to get started if I haven't got started yet. So there's an assessment. Am I on the right ladder? Am I in the right path? Am I in the right job? Am I in the right relationship? And this experience of evaluation of where am I in my life right now, and do I need to make changes, is what I refer to as the midlife event. And those kinds of things can happen throughout the lifespan. We call it a midlife crisis or an identity crisis when we look at where we are and we determine I am not on the right path, right job, right relationship, and I need to make some changes. I'm feeling the pressure of either time or circumstances to make those changes now. And so I'm looking at the options. So we're going to see the theory of Marcia come up again. So we're talking about midlife events that are standard for midlife, while at the same time recognizing that these kinds of events occur throughout the lifespan. So I'm going down the road of my life, and every once in a while I might come across an event that causes me to reevaluate what road I'm on. The road sign's on there. I get into an accident. I watch somebody else get into an accident. Any one of those things, these markers on the road, okay, I'm traveling along my path, and then I experience something that makes me think, maybe I need to be on a different path. And sometimes we hear this in terms of the stories of individuals who have struggled with alcohol or drug abuse, and then they're involved in an accident per se, and it's a tragic lesson to learn, but they walk away with, I was drunk with my friend, we got into an accident, and he died, and I lived, and I realized then that I need to change my life, that I need to turn things around. And we can really talk about that in the same context as we would talk about a midlife crisis, where an individual is kind of going along with their life, and then they realize, hey, this isn't where I want to be. This isn't where I want to go. So there's a great scene. I'm not sure if many people recognize it for what it is, but in the new Star Wars, 3 movies, the after Luke Skywalker. We have Rey, who is the main character, and she's on Tatooine, I think, and she's a scavenger. So she's going around and taking parts, and she cleans them and she sells them for food. And there's a scene in which she's cleaning, and she looks over, and there's this old lady that's cleaning with her, and they just kind of hold that moment for a while. She's just looking at it, and what she's going through is the realization that she doesn't make any changes right now. That's the future she's looking at. And that really struck me. Even the first time I saw it, I was like, wow, she's having a crisis. She's having a midlife event. And at that point, she didn't know the way out. I mean, that arrived upon her serendipitously, but she was in that thinking. She was looking at what she's doing, and she's looking at her future. And that can happen at any point in life. So here we have this road to where we're coming. And then there's some of these markations are when physically you recognize that you're changing physically, and you enter into this, what we would call midlife events and possibly midlife crises. So in order to really recognize that, I want to bring back this sense of Marcia's theory, where we're talking about commitment and crises in the pointed terms, as I applied in puzzle pieces, to the creation of those little pieces. They call it our career. Every one of those dots. What's our family? What's our friends? What's our career or vocation? What is our creativity, and what's our spiritual life? Each one of those components there, I've been building pieces, and I'm building this jigsaw puzzle called me, identity. So any one of those areas are under construction, or there's all kinds of things going on. We're still in process. We're still constructing our identity. And here we are. Some things are an identity achievement, but there's still things that are here. There's things that are on the back burner. There's things that we might feel stuck in. There's things that we're actively working on. And there's some stuff that are in identity achievement. Now, anything that we feel is in foreclosure, identity diffusion, and moratorium is subject to our reevaluation and the creation of pressure to make the change now, because my time is limited. If I'm going to do this, I got to do it now. I'm going to run out of time. So now or never sort of situation. So there's this pressure to take these things that are not achieved yet and move them into the identity achievement. Now, that doesn't mean that there's also some things sometimes, we do have achieved identity, and suddenly it goes into moratorium because we're not satisfied with that anymore. Maybe I'm in this, created a job. Let's say I've been teaching for 22 years, and I'm going along, and maybe something happens that moves me over to crisis, and I'm like, oh, I'm not feeling as satisfied with this. I'm not feeling like I can encounter this the way I did. I think I want to do something else. If I'm going to do that, I better do it now before it's too late for me to retrain and to start over, or make that kind of shift, or whatever. We might want to make that kind of change. And those stories are the stories that we see portrayed in novels, movies, of people reaching a point in their lives where they're just like, something needs to change, and the whole movie is basically their crises that's going through. So an interesting graphic to keep in mind. Things start to shift because we recognize that we are out of time, and we're running out of time, or we have to start doing something now before we're too old to do it. And hence we end up in the midlife crisis for whatever it is. And then we have stereotypes of the midlife crisis. The guy goes out, leaves his family, buys a sports car, gets an earring, dates a girl named Buffy, whatever. All of that stuff, that's the stereotype, and that does happen. There's a fear of losing youth and vigor. Let's face it, the entire erectile dysfunction market right now is focusing on individuals who are in midlife crisis. ED is actually a pretty rare condition, and people, everybody should take it. part of that youthful vigor kind of thing. I see, because I'm at my age, I get all kinds of ads coming at me from probably because of the stuff I'm looking at, but from Facebook coming at me about vigor and I'm taking testosterone in order to feel young again and stuff like that. I'm 56 and I feel like I'm 20 and all these things, and it's really kind of harping on this denial of reality of aging and sort of being healthy and vigorous and treating your body well is an important lifespan sort of thing. But they've really sort of capitalized this on the market of products. Let alone, I just focused on men at that point. How many youth-enhancing products are there for women who are aging? I mean, all the makeup and all the stuff to make your skin young and supple again. And all of these things that are really this collective sort of pushing away at aging that is focused on midlife individuals. Cosmetics for young people, not a really big seller. I mean, they do sell, obviously, cosmetics for middle-aged women, flying off the shelves in order to stave off gravity, stave off the aging process because of anxiety related to aging, then that same anxiety gets applied to other aspects of that person's life and they may end up in crisis. So let's take a look at the assignments, the assessments for this particular chapter here. We have chapter 9 discussion, talk about crises that you have experienced or individuals that you've known that have gone into crisis for that. And then really looking a quiz about your own. I'm going to keep this private, but any psychosocial events that you've had. Have you ever had something that's happened to you? Could be just a natural midlife crisis. The kids moved out and you're sitting there at home and now it's my turn and you came to UMA. There you go. That's a really good example. Or I was in this job and then the job went away and I had to do something, so I came to UMA. Or I was in this relationship for a real long, realized that I don't really need to put up with this anymore, got rid of that, and now I'm dating, I'm in a new relationship, I made that change. Each one of those, sharing with you the psychosocial event, what happened that made you decide that you need to make some sort of change. These are very, very crucial aspects of our lives where we have, in a very real way, took command of our fate, did not let the just natural order of things push us in a particular direction and just following down the river. Basically took the paddle out and started going against the stream. And they are very commendable sort of activities that people engage in when encountering these kinds of things. So that's it for this week, I believe, right? No other assignments in there. I had to check my slide to make sure. But get this video out as soon as I can. I'm going to try and get them out early. I'm going to say that, but it's really nice out too. So life-work balance, right? So enjoy this week. I know people are already in the discussion boards doing this, so I look forward to reading more of your comments, and I will see you later this week. Take care.